Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hearth of Thought. If this is your first time, welcome. This is a virtual fireside where people who love Africa and care about the economic development of Africa come together to talk about us from different angles, political, social, cultural, and economic aspect. And the goal is for us to change our mindsets and to see ourselves as primary actors of our own development. So if you like this kind of content, please stick around, subscribe, like, and most importantly, comment. Let's share our opinions, let's share our thoughts, and let's together build a community of like-minded people who would really want to champion change on the continent. So at the intro of this video, we saw a clip that I found very interesting because it was true then and it's true today. And Nkrumah says that it's not Africa that is poor, but it's the Africans that are poor. And people laughed in the audience, and I thought, that wasn't meant to be funny, but I guess they laughed because they're like, well, that's true, because we can all agree that we're not poor, right? As we've said in previous videos. But in terms of this economic battlefield, when you think of, from a business and innovations perspective, when you think of different industries, what comes to mind? Probably Germany for the automobile. You probably think India for textile, Italy for fashion, and Silicon Valley for tech, and many other countries that are world leaders in different sectors. And in terms of trading goods and services, obviously the number one being China. And most countries have positioned themselves in the world as a leader in something. Like it or not, the trade war and the economic war that goes on is something that can be avoided. We're talking about Africans growing, but we cannot practice any isolationist type of strategies because we do live in a global world, and it's important for us to, again, interact with other countries as we currently are. But the difference is that we're not benefiting as of right now. So when we think of Africa, what are we world leaders in? I would say natural resources. Again, that's where the cocoa comes from, cobalt, uranium. Most of the reserves are on the continent. Natural resources pretty much. Because when you look at the export rates of most countries on the continent, it's mostly exporting raw materials, meaning that they're at the primary stage of extraction, little or no value added to it. So pretty much at the raw level, stage one level of production. And when that happens, the raw material is exported, transformed into a finished product, and sold back to us. So I was watching, videos from the United Nations General Assembly, and I, saw a few speeches from different African leaders. And it was important to note that, what most presidents said was, well, Africa needs a seat at the Security Council. This is 54 countries. It's not fair that we're not represented at that level. Decisions are being made. We should partake. We should have at least 2 seats. I believe the president of Kenya said, well, we need at least 2 seats. And the Angolan president was like, well, we need 5 seats.
As we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, Africa also marks 20 years since the Ezulwini Consensus and the City Declaration, the 2 historic milestones that establishes the common African position on UN Security Council reforms. For 2 decades, Africa has spoken in one voice, demanding justice, equity, and representation in the highest organ of global governance. This demand, however, continues to be ignored, deferred, or endlessly debated to the detriment of both Africa and the legitimacy of the United Nations itself. You cannot claim to be the United Nations while disregarding the voice of 54 nations. It is not possible. Africa is no longer willing to wait on the margins of global governance while decisions about peace, security, and development are made without our understanding, without our perspectives, and without our voice. Africa's exclusion is not only unacceptable, unfair, and grossly unjust, it also undermines the very credibility of the United Nations, this organization. Africa dominates most of the Security Council agenda, provides some of the largest contingents of UN peacekeeping forces, and bears the heaviest costs of instability. Yet we remain the only continent without a permanent seat at the main table where decisions about our destiny are made. Africa deserves, ladies and gentlemen, at the very least, 2 permanent seats with full rights, including the right to veto, and 2 additional non-permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council.
But to have a seat at the table, what do you need? And this goes true for a state level, individual level, family level. To have any sort of power and respect, it's often associated with wealth, right? We can all agree. Like it or not, that's the frame of the human nature. At the family level, you have your wealthy auntie or your wealthy uncle who has the most respect, doesn't matter his age, doesn't matter nothing. Same for states and nations. To have a seat at the table, what did China do? China decided, well, we're not going to be bottom of the class very long. We want to have a say. And they did that. What is Africa doing? Petitioning and saying, well, we need seats. It's like, that's not how it's going to work. For you to have a seat at the table, you have to contribute in one way or another in the world scene. That's just the game. Be it military prowess or economic power, soft power, hard power, you have to be a major player. Most countries who impact the world or who have any sort of dominion over the rest, it's like they have power in one way or another, be it economically, that's the markets, or politically, or military prowess. So what is it that Africans are leading in? For us to get that respect, for us to get that seat at the table. So if anything, we're leading in all the negative numbers, poverty rates, unemployment rates, literacy rates, you name it, health, you name it. Bottom of the class, right? And it seems to me that we are not only trapped in poverty, but we're very much basking in it. It seems like we're almost having some syndrome from this poverty trap. What is the poverty trap? Well, economists will say if a nation's poor, they don't have access to health, they don't have access to good, healthcare services, education, they can't be productive, you get, and the cycle of poverty continues. Well, if you can't be in good health, you can't be educated, you can't be productive, and you can't be productive, then you're poor, and the cycle continues. And we're trapped in poverty. And it's true because when we look at the structural adjustment plans or the different visionary plans that most nations have, seemingly doing well, no, but the plans are there. So we wonder, but why are things looking like they're looking? Because if we talk to experts, we talk to different people in politics, they'll tell you, well, they'll list you all the big plans that they're doing and everything. And you would think, okay, that's not what we're saying. That's not what we're seeing. So in this economic battle, it's important for us to position ourselves as leaders in something, to have absolute advantage in a field or another. And to me, Africa would gain advantage from collaborating with each other because unity is strength, right? But we're not quite there yet. And the problem of us being in this cycle is, well, you would think, even though we're trapped, well, even though work is being done, well, it's very disheartening because when we look at the numbers in terms of GDP per head, it's not, it's changed over the years, but the increase is quite small. We have like almost a 0.2% on average increase. So it may seem at a macro level that, well, work is being done, well, this was done, that was done. But from an individual perspective, when we look at the GDP per capita, we see the increase may seem strong, but from an individual level, it's not very promising. And the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. We've seen the videos of Africa online where people live very affluent lives, very rich lives, But that's not the reality of the average African. So, how do we escape this poverty trap? How do we escape this poverty trap? And the key themes that always comes up when the discourse is brought up is, well, there's governance and accountability, we must work on mismanagement, we must work on corruption, and there's health and education question, there's agriculture and food security, economic freedom, economic diversification, regional integration, and all those different schools of thought. The structuralists who think, well, this is about our colonial masters. And you have, neoliberals who think, well, we need to liberalize our businesses. We need to facilitate trade. There's the developmental state model, which is, well, let's pretty much do what the people in Asia did. Let's follow the East Asian model. And we have the Pan-Africanists who are saying, well, we need to come together, form a union and, get one currency. And for others, we need to focus on sustainable development, others agricultural development or agricultural-led development, and entrepreneurship, innovation, tech. And there's also the discourse on aid. Let's break free from aid. Let's be independent. Regardless of the school of thought, in terms of how we break free from this trap, the question remains, practically, what do we do? And I was watching this video from Dangote, and who best to listen to than him? He's a seasoned entrepreneur, businessman, wealthiest Black African. He has successful businesses. He deals with multiple governments and has to deal with, the hurdles that come to doing business on the continent. He works across several countries in Africa. And he had something interesting to say. He said that in 5 years, or let's hear from him directly, but to paraphrase, he's saying that it would take us 5 years to turn things around in Africa and transform Africa into a heaven. And he cares less about the corruption because he feels like, well, if we dream big enough, if we invest in, robust financial systems, if we invest in agriculture and, our industries, then we stand a good chance.
Actually turn Africa into a heaven in the next 5 years. It doesn't take time.
So
because like what I keep saying, you need to think big, then you grow big. You think small, you never grow.
Okay, but the reality is right now we're still relying on foreign partners. To create more African banks is going to take some time. So what's your solution?
Well, the solution is that right now people have seen exactly what what they've been doing. We don't expect the international banks to do, but we should also make sure that we have for us to grow, we need a very strong financial institutions. We need to have good manufacturing base. We need to also face agriculture. All the other artificial intelligence and they will follow. It's part of the growth. But once we do that, we focus on our own mineral sources. I am telling you, Africa will be totally a different story. People now always come and talk about corruption. Of course, Africa is not the only place that you have corruption. Corruption is all over the place. The only difference is that our corrupt people, when they steal the money, they fly the money out of the continent. If they continue to invest here, fine, then the economy will grow. I apologize with respect to maybe countries like Indonesia before. I'm not talking about now. During Suharto, are you saying that there was no corruption? Of course, there was corruption. In all Thailand, corruption everywhere. But they were able to grow just because they did not do what we are doing in Africa, taking the money out of the continent, out of their Asian region. Okay, so I'm not saying that I encourage. All what I'm saying is that there's no society, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, everywhere that you think of, there is corruption. But our own is totally different, where now you deprive your country of the money, you deprive your family of the money, because you won't tell your family you've stolen money. So, you deprive everybody, then you now go and hide the money somewhere. When you die, the money will go into the banking system.
This is brilliant. I mean, I've never thought
You know,
of corruption in this way.
To tell you the truth, okay, like now, somebody was asking me a question. I said some people came to visit our own fertilizer, and I was telling them that, you know, I've said it before in one forum, that in the next 40 months, Africa will not import fertilizer from anywhere. We have a very aggressive trajectory right now. We want to put Dangote fertilizer to be the largest producer of fertilizer, of urea, bigger and higher than Qatar. And watch me, 40 months. Give me 40 months.
He says, you know, we're not the only, Africa isn't the only place where there's corrupt leaders. It's like there's corruption everywhere. So if others can do it, that means the corruption, so can we, you know? So what do you think about this video? What do you think about Dangote's perspective? Do you think we indeed can turn things around in 5 years? If we're serious, he believes so. And he probably has some good metrics as to why he's saying that, because he does business and he's the best person to tell us that, you know. But in terms of the obstacles, that's where the problem is, right? So it seems to me that we are putting obstacles on our own path. And by we, I mean our governments. We've had multiple structural adjustment plans. Every country has its version. The Ethiopian Growth and Transformation Plan, which is very interesting. And we have the African Union's Agenda 2063, which I think it's called the Africa We Want. And we have the new Partnership for African Development. There's a bunch of projects, a bunch of initiatives that are taken continental level to get us there. But in terms of trading between countries, it's still not quite strong. But the question would be, what are we trading? We're still very much in subsistence mode. So what are we trading? And can we say that to escape this poverty trap, all we need, again, Dangote is telling us that we need to dream big. So he's talking about the mindset. It's very important because others had a big dream. China had a big dream. They still do. They're not stopping. America had a dream. I have a dream. Like, there's a big dream. Yes, we can. Like, it's all about the mindset. Do we believe that we can? Or are we defeated before even trying? I very much like the Kenyan President Ruto's speech. And he's talking about the initiatives that are being taken at the African Union's level. Let's take a listen.
At the same time, the African Union is championing 3 transformative institutions. The Africa Central Bank, which will issue a single currency and free our trade from dependence on foreign money. The Africa Monetary Fund, positioned to stabilize our economies and give us true financial sovereignty. And the Africa Investment Bank, designed to mobilize resources for infrastructure, industrialization, and integration that Africa needs to rise. And to complete this vision, the Africa Credit Rating Agency, one that understands our realities, values our uniqueness, and tells our story with fairness and truth, has already been established.
So what do you think about that? It sounds quite promising. His speech was one of the strongest. I listened to a few. There's him and the Angolan president that gave really good speeches. You should watch those in its entirety. But I want to leave this episode with a question. How can we escape the poverty trap? And again, I don't think that on an individual level we can't do anything because there's insecurity across the continent. So that means at the home, we can figure out our home education. There's juvenile delinquency. People don't feel safe in our cities. There's tons of crime. The crime rates are high. Murders, kidnappings. The crime is exploding the charts. And how do we even get to a place where we're boosting our tourism if our cities are unsafe? Before we even get to the, developing our touristic resources. Because my goal is for us to brainstorm on how concretely can we escape the poverty trap one step at a time. And people are doing amazing work on this front. And I really much appreciate the development plans, and they look well structured, well thought out. But what is the biggest obstacle to this, the successful implementation of these plans? And how can we as individuals Do you think if I'm running a business or if I'm running a project, for example, does it matter how the individual runs it? Or is there a bigger, deeper problem that is the biggest obstacle to breaking free from this trap? If that's what it is, let's discuss in the comment section. What do you think is the biggest obstacle for us to escape this poverty trap? And what do you think about President Ruto's speech? And let's discuss this in the comment section. Again, thank you for joining today's episode of The Fireside, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.